Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great, and what a day it is to be talking breakout wide receivers. James Cook, Stefon Diggs, all that and much, much more. It really has been a great little Tuesday here. Training camp is starting. We got Jim Harbaugh actually praying at this point for Najee Harris's eye. Nothing to see here. The Honey Badger retired. I mowed the lawn. Dwayne, what a freaking Tuesday we have going, man.
What a freaking Tuesday. Yeah, I got the lawn done yesterday, Ian. So I'm right there with you.
Feels good, man. Feels good. I don't have the, like nice quiet mower. All my neighbors do. So I'm sure I'm not, they're not very big fans of me, but whatever. It's done. We got it in the bag. Life is good. Again, life not so good for certain NFL players, though, as we continue to get injury reports out of here. Zach Moss is on the NFL list. Darren Waller is someone who is already on the PUP list. Dwayne, I'm just happy to see you back, man. You spent the last week drafting best ball teams in Florida. So welcome back to work. But how was that?
Well, I appreciate that. It is nice just to sit there in the chair and not only let the waves wash over you, Ian, but let the best ball takes wash over you. Just let your rankings takes, where you got to sit there and actually put your convictions to the test. So, yeah, I did quite a bit of drafting. Hopefully, one of those entries pays for the trip I took. Obviously, the truck had some problems on the trip, so we had to buy a new vehicle also, which was a first, being on vacation and having to buy a new car in another state, which I had to travel to another state from there to go get. But, Miss Amanda, she's super happy with the selection, so that's all I care about.
Well, we are happy that you made it back, my friend. We're happy that you guys who listen to us right now are tuned into the Fantasy Life Show. And accordingly, let's get into it, guys. It is time for our DraftKings opening lines. We got some training camp news. All right, Dwayne, two big items. Again, there's more stuff going on, but just two most fantasy relevant things we're going to be focusing on here to start. James Cook and Stefon Diggs. First things first, though, is with the Bills RB1, who reported to training camp, but the new cool thing to do these days is to basically hold in and wait to get your money. So obviously, James Cook has been quite vocal throughout this entire offseason about wanting a new contract. Why not, man? Scored 21 touchdowns in 19 games last season. The dude is a walking, talking big play out there. What are your thoughts here, though, on Cook actively now at this point, Dwayne, not practicing until he gets a new deal?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. He's trying to get paid before that touchdown regression hits, man. We're not going to score as many touchdowns as last year, James Cook. So hat tip to your agent. He obviously understands regression. Who knows? Maybe he read a certain article over on Fantasy Life a while back and thought, you know what? We better get this new contract underway. All jokes aside, guys, I do think this is, it's just another feather in the cap of Ray Davis. Ian, you've done a great job of covering him. I listened to you and Friedman last week talk about the on the handcuff show. I thought Friedman slightly outdid you in the draft. I got to say, but it was really close. And one of your big names, man, Ray Davis, and you've been on it all off season. Number one, looked really good in that spot start last season for Mr. James Cook. Number two, I'm also proud of you. How far you've come. I felt like you and I used to have to argue more about guys like Ty Johnson. Now you're kind of like, you know what, man, screw Ty Johnson. Ray Davis is the next man up. Maybe Ty Johnson gets some of that work, but Ray Davis showed he's got some passing down chops as well. Ty Johnson is back on the team, but not something we really want to let worry us for a year or two player. So one, we could have James Cook, in a situation where he's not ready to go for the start of the season. So that actually makes Ray Davis an even better click than what we already think he is, which is even if James Cook is healthy. Number two, man, he played well enough that are we so sure he doesn't just carve out more of the backfield and maybe just eliminate Ty Johnson from the equation? It's not like this team has ever truly loaded up James Cook. We can never rule it out, man. But his utilization actually went down last year as the season went. I was looking at it yesterday. I want to say James Cook in the second half of the year might have gotten over 50% snap share like one time, including playoff games. So earlier in the year, they were using him a little bit more. So again, once they pay him, who knows, maybe they decide to load up James Cook. It'd be pretty sweet. If they gave him 60% of the carries, we'd like it. But I think there's room, man, here for Ray Davis. Could potentially carve out a little bit of standalone value. Obviously, huge contingency upside here with one of the teams we like a lot. Man, Brandon Thorne, I think he's got the Bills as one of his top 3 offensive lines. Those released over on ETR just the other day. Always love Brandon.
early Vegas implied lines do have the Bills as the highest scoring offense in the NFL. And again, in that aforementioned spot start last year, 23 of 27 backfield carries and targets ended up going to Ray Davis. So yes, Ty Johnson is going to be there, but guys, the amount of backfields that truly are just a one-man show, very few and far between in the year 2025. So again, if you want to say someone like Tyler Algier or Zach Charbonnet, who, yes, I do think in a best case scenario would have a few more touches than Ray Davis in the game, go ahead. But again, we can live with 20 combined carries and targets and an offense as good as the Bills. So we'll see what happens again with this James Cook situation. Terry McLaurin, also someone who has not been, he actively did not report to training camp, so need to keep an eye on that as well. But in some good news, Dwayne, we actually have Stefon Diggs being fully cleared to practice and out there functioning as Drake May's wide receiver one. So obviously it wasn't a given coming off that torn ACL last season. A little bit long in the tooth, but man, you start looking at this depth chart and all of a sudden, man, sure seems like Stefon Diggs is someone who we can buy in fantasy land as a wide receiver four. Not saying we're going to get wide receiver one production out of the guy, but Dwayne, it's been 10 years since Stefon Diggs has finished worse than the wide receiver 25 in PPR points per game. I'm not so sure he can't make it 11.
I drafted two teams last night when I was out on my walk, Ian, and Stefon Diggs went much higher in both. So people are already reacting. I'll be interested to see how quickly his ADP moves, but he might be more of a round 6 pick. I don't know, man. Once we get into that range, there are some other names I like there. We'd have to slice it up, but I can see it. Not a lot of competition right now with the Patriots. Right, we got Demario Douglas manning the slot. We got Kyle Williams, a guy that was thought of, Ian, as a round 7 or undrafted free agent when the draft process started, and then he shot up to becoming a round 3 draft pick. So hey, congrats to you, Kyle Williams. Massive climb. Watched some film on this guy while I was actually off as well, and I there's some things to like there about Kyle Williams. But he's an unproven player. The next guy is the guy that, I think he's your new version of Dalton Schultz. You're going to slander the man and his complete family. And that's Hunter Henry, not this huge target owner. And to be fair to you, it's not like he's ever been a 25% target share guy. So yeah, man, doors wide open. I don't want to make a habit of drafting 32-year-old wide receivers coming off of injuries. But if I were going to do it, I do think this is the scenario to do it because there is opportunity here, right? If you told me that Stefon Diggs was going to be playing alongside Nico Collins, as well as Jaden Daniels, and maybe they added Christian Kirk and he was still in Houston, man, honestly, I don't know if I'd feel as good about that. We like that quarterback situation a little bit better, but at the same time, man, that's a lot of target competition for Steph Diggs. But here, it really is wide open. So I agree. I did move him up the ranks. I also moved him up in the projections because I knew you were going to have some sort of smart-ass remark about me being too low on his targets. So just to tell you, I updated it right before the show. I didn't move him a ton. I think you said I was at 104. He's at 111. I gave him a 23% targets per route run, though, Ian. He was at 23% last year, 25% for the last 3 years. So I think that's pretty generous for a guy coming off ACL at his age.
I actually have in my notes here, Dwayne, 102 projected targets, Dwayne, 3 question marks. Those are rookie numbers. So thank you. I do not have to yell at you about these projected targets here. I am wondering, though, because, again, part of my research here, there's been this assumption this is going to be this run-first offense, okay? And I get it from some standpoint. You have Mike Vrabel here, the defense, more conservative guy and everything. But Josh McDaniels is the one running this offense, man. He has actually led a top 13 offense in total pass attempts in 14 of his 18 seasons as offensive coordinator and head coach. Do you think there's a chance, Dwayne, that we see the Patriots, we always go back to Madden playbooks, maybe finish a bit more balanced than we're expecting? And accordingly, maybe if we do have Drake May becoming this late round gem, everyone's hyped him up to be, we get Stefon Diggs, we get Kyle Williams, maybe even we do, get Hunter Henry. Hell freezes over and Hunter Henry gains 700 receiving yards. How many passes do you actually see the Patriots having this year?
Yeah, I think the defense would really have to overperform our expectations. Now they have a few good players on defense, especially in the secondary. But I think they would have to outproduce in order for us to get more passing attempts than what I've got them projected for. If I'm looking at the Patriots right now, I've got them projected for 37 total touchdowns, which is 28th. I've got them projected for, where are my pass attempts? This is terrible. Looking at, I got them with plenty of rushing attempts. So I do have them leaning more to the rush. But if you look at their passing yards per game, I got them at 207. Remember, the average guys for an NFL starter is 215 over the last 3 years. And I do have them at 29.7 pass attempts per game, which is going to be in the bottom 8. But I could see a scenario where game scripts do force them out of that. So here's my take on it. I think number one, Mike Vrabel we've seen him want to play like these kind of close games and like, hey, let's just not make mistakes and lose the game, especially if he doesn't have a super talented roster. You're dealing with a younger, quarterback in Drake May. Also, the plan is to try to use Drake May more on the ground game and probably encourage him to scramble. So I think that's going to take a few pass attempts away as well. And the other thing really here is like outside of Stefon Diggs, right? Well, really, even with Stefon Diggs, we have all question marks, right, across the receiving court. If we assume Stefon Diggs is healthy, okay, we can take that one. But then outside of that, what do we have? Kayshon Boutte's not really good. We had a major bust by Jalen Polk last year. We've already talked about the tight ends. It, to me, seems like an offense where you probably want to stay more balanced and try to win through efficiency than force things through your weapons because you're just really not loaded at that position. But I do hear you on Josh McDaniels. He definitely has been a guy that has leaned into the past. Now, a lot of those years were with a guy named freaking Tom Brady.
We are 6 or 7 weeks away at this point, Dwain, from you screaming on Sunday night about Mac Hollins playing over Kyle Williams. And I, for one, cannot wait. So, guys, this has been our DraftKings opening lines. And now a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. Baseball fans, summer is in full swing and the season is heating up. From midseason rivalries to breakout performances, every game is packed with drama, and there is no better time to jump in with my partners at DraftKings Sportsbook. Right now, new customers who bet just $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Whether it's towering home runs or clutch strikeouts, you won't want to miss a moment. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using my promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. Stay in on the action and use your $150 in bonus bets on DraftKings same-game parlays for a shot at an even bigger payout. Combine multiple bets together from the same game. Love the thrill of live betting? DraftKings has got you covered. Bet live on in-progress games right as they happen, making watching the game that much more exciting. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, hey, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Pick 6 and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use my promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, Dwain, now time for the main topic of today's show, and that is breakout wide receivers. Invite everyone to go check out your 3-part series on the topic over at fantasylife.com if you're into reading things like words in the year 2025. But I just want to start off, Dwain, kind of defining what you are talking about here, a breakout wide receiver, because we actually had, a show a couple weeks ago where kind of in the just intro before we got going, me and producer Swing were talking about, things like breakouts and sleepers and just these provocative words and terms that we use in fantasy football, but maybe people don't actually know what they mean. You all of a sudden sat there and were like, no, a breakout wide receiver is specifically someone who hasn't hit this mark and then manages to do it over the next couple of years. So define what a breakout wide receiver is for all of us, please.
Yeah, so mostly the way I define this, Ian, is whether or not it's your first wide receiver 1 season. So if we're talking about in PPR going back to 2011, the wide receiver 12, right? So that's a top 12 wide receiver. That's a wide receiver 1 in a 12-team league has averaged 16 fantasy points per game. So your first season to get to 16 fantasy points or more per game would be a wide receiver 1 breakout. If you look at wide receiver 2s, it's 13.5 to 15.99, right? We got to take it all the way up to that 16. So that's the wide receiver 2 threshold. So I don't count wide receiver 3 seasons as breakouts, wide receiver 4 seasons. You can argue that like every receiver could have some sort of breakout of their own. Like if they improve by 20 or 30%, like that's an improvement for them. But for the purposes of this, really people care about fantasy. They want to know, do I have a shot at drafting a wide receiver 1 that might be going later in drafts, or might I be able to get a wide receiver 2 that I'm getting a discount on in average draft position? I will tell you, Ian, people are pretty hip to this stuff nowadays. I think 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was a much bigger edge in this market. But man, just looking at ADPs and stuff, I will say the market was really close on these. There are some we're going to talk about that I think are obvious values, but I did find myself as I was going through them on several of them, I was like, dang it. Like I thought this was going to actually be one of these where I'm going to say it's this big value. The market is actually already pretty much there as far as the way they're pricing the player.
As Dwain mentions in his lovely article, 30% of yearly wide receiver one performances have actually come from players who have never accomplished that feat before. 38% of wide receiver two performances were also from first timers. So now looking specifically at experience, Dwain, the amount of years players have been out there. Not going to be touching on rookies. I think we spent enough, hours in the offseason on that. But talk about, again, the correlation between breakout wide receivers and how many years they've actually been in the league.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the rookies, the wide receiver 2s and 3s, obviously that's where the biggest portion of those happen. Okay, I mean, but we are going to fully focus on wide receiver 2s and 3s today because you talked about it. But you guys can see, and if you don't have it up on the screen, you're just listening on the podcast. Year one, rookie year, breakouts for wide receiver 1, 15% of the cohort did it in their first season. The next 2 seasons, though, for wide receiver 1, breakouts are really big, Ian, with 26% in year 2 and 26% in year 3. Pretty much similar for wide receiver 2 breakouts as well, except we do get a few more of those as rookies at 21%. But if you look at year 2, it's really big. For the wide receiver 2 breakouts, 40% of all wide receiver 2 breakout seasons came in year 2 across the cohort. But like you said, for the purposes of the show, now we're going to show you guys what that really looks like for those year 2 and 3 receivers. And I just want to say, like, the reason we want to focus on those guys. So once we remove the rookies from the sample, Ian, 62%. So 28 out of 45 wide receiver 1 breakouts did it in their second or third year. So how does the saying go? 62% of the time it works all the time. So we're not saying they never break out later. It just becomes more rare. And we're going to have another show for you guys that'll come a little later talking about late breakouts. So don't worry, we'll get to those. We're going to talk mostly about the early breakouts today. Outliers do happen, Ian. Like, if we look at this cohort of wide receivers, so the 20 of 28, 71% of the guys that were in years 1 or 2 already had a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 finish on their resume when they broke out for a wide receiver 1. What's that saying that we talk about all the time? What's the most predictive stat year over year in fantasy football? Oh, it's freaking fantasy points. Sometimes we don't need rocket science. Now, guys, I did go to the next level to see if the underlying data also supported it or told a different story. So yards per route run, targets per route run, all that sort of stuff, PFF receiving grade. You'll hear us talk about those things with these players. But the ultimate beginning of the filter, I just started with, okay, what year were they in? And then what was their previous wide receiver finish? So again, 71% of those guys that had a wide receiver 1 finish in year 2 or 3 already had a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver finish or wide receiver 3 finish on their resume.
Great stuff, Mr. Dwain. Accordingly, let's talk about these year 2 and 3 wide receivers. Time for some breakouts, the top dogs, as we get into quarter 2 here on the Fantasy Life Show. Lad McConkey, Dwain, someone who I'm sure won a lot of people out there money because this dude was on freaking fire down the stretch. In fact, week 8 through the playoffs, 19.2 PPR points per game. That was good for wide receiver 5 status behind only Jamar Chase, Mike Evans, T. Higgins, and our one true sun god, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Some could say that he already has kind of broken out to an extent. Unfortunately, though, as you were kind of mentioning, not exactly getting a discount on him early in drafts. But talk about how McConkey stacks up and what your expectations are for him ahead of year 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's priced right. He's going in the middle of round 2. He is my favorite breakout candidate. And you can actually take the splits even further back. Ian, he took over that full-time role in week 3. So basically, I look for whenever these wide receivers get to that 80% route participation or higher and kind of stay there. And if you look at that over from week 3 through the playoff game, he averaged 16.9 fantasy points per game. That's a nice sample size, guys. Remember, 16 fantasy points per game is a wide receiver 1. So for the year, while he showed up as a 14.9 fantasy points per game player, you can kind of argue he already really did this. He did this for most of the season. He was already a wide receiver 1, and that just makes it really easy. He had a 26% target share from week 3 through the playoff game. And if you guys watch some of those games at the end of the year with him and Justin Herbert, man, you just talk about a hand and glove kind of experience. Yeah. These two guys are absolutely locked in. If you look at his underlying data points, Ian, 2.30 yards per route run. That was better than freaking Malik Neighbors at 2.17. Now, having a good quarterback does help you. So I'm going to give some credit to Mr. Justin Herbert there. But just real quick, here are the guys that got to a 2.30 yards per route run or higher in their rookie season. Odell Beckham Jr., A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua. You can tell me when to stop. Jamar Chase, Brian Thomas Jr., Chris Olave, and Rashee Rice. So Brown, Olave, and Rice were the only other twos to post wide receiver twos in their year one. And we also know with Rashee Rice, we could do the same thing we just did with McConkey. Once he took over his starting role in his rookie year in week 14, he was really a wide receiver one the rest of the way. So just a super, super duper good list to be on here. They did add Trey Harris in the draft, but we've already had Mike Williams retire since I wrote this article. So I think we're feeling pretty good about Mr. McConkey. Quentin Johnston's kind of doing his thing, but feels like the clear-cut number one here, man. I just don't really have a lot of doubts. Love taking him in the middle of round 2.
My wide receiver 11, your wide receiver 10. But is that even high enough, Dwayne? I mean, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, we have A.J. Brown, we have Drake London, all players that are also fantastic in their own right. But you can make the argument that Ladd actually has the best real-life quarterback out of that group, with all due respect to Jalen Hurts and Jared Goff and even Michael Penix, and also arguably has less target competition. So I understand the Chargers are going to want to run the football a little bit more, but it's not like the Eagles are going to be this pass-heavy offense. It's not like the Lions have been a group to throw the ball around either. Why don't we put Ladd McConkey higher, Dwayne? Why?
Yeah, I think you could, man, to be honest. I mean, you and I have gone back and forth about this. I had him ahead of A.J. Brown. You know, I got yelled at by you, but now you're asking me why I don't have Ladd McConkey higher. No, I'm telling the truth, but I'm kidding, because I know that's what this is all about. We go through this process through the offseason. I will say there's just there's a little slight thing, because this doesn't always work out, right? So if you guys go read the article, and Ian said, if you like to read words in the year 2025, it's a great article for you. But I did try to do a really good job, guys, of just giving bullet points for some of you that don't want to read. For you guys that are lazy, just kidding. We love all of you. There are bullet points. When you look at it, Ian, wide receiver 1 finishes for guys like Ladd McConkey, 33% of them went on to do that in the year after their rookie season. 25% of them continued on as wide receiver 2s. So, I mean, it is a situation where we can't just automatically assume he's going to go to a wide receiver 1. And some of these other guys that we have going ahead of him, they have proven to be wide receiver 1s multiple times over. I think the guy you could make the argument for is Drake London. Right. Drake London has really only given us one wide receiver 1 season. Now, his underlying data points have always pointed to him being a wide receiver 1. He just played with really crappy quarterbacks on a team that wanted to run the ball all the time. So I think if you were to make a case, like, he's the guy, and Drake London's going ahead of A.J. Brown, so then you have to move Ladd above A.J. Brown. But I think that's about the line. I don't think I could get him past Amon-Ra or get him up into that next tier.
And for what it's worth, once you get past McConkey, we get to Tyreek, T. Higgins, Devontae Adams. I do think it is a tier drop-off at that point. Someone in that tier, though, is going to be none other than rising third-year wide receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba, fresh off a season where he did catch triple-digit passes. That's great to see. Finished as the wide receiver 18 in PPR points per game, now going at about that same spot, depending on, again, where you are playing fantasy football. But my main question here with JSN, Dwayne, is unlike someone like Ladd McConkey, we don't have the amazing underlying factors. I mean, just looking at these past 2 seasons, JSN among 82 wide receivers, 55th in yards per out run, 47th in targets per out run. That said, I'm guessing you're about to tell us that he still does generally fit the archetype of someone who we could reasonably expect a wide receiver 1 breakout from.
Yeah, I mean, and really what you have to look at with JSN and these things, like, they're just layered, but you try to look for, break points and different things in the season that you can look at. And I hate arbitrary cutoffs. So if you guys read the article and you see an arbitrary cutoff by me, like, just DM me and tell me I'm a complete idiot, because I go out of my way to avoid it. What I'm typically looking for is, when did a player take over a larger role? When did something in their team change? Something that we can look at and say, okay, this actually makes sense for the way we should think about the player moving forward. And one of the big things for JSN, we had DK Metcalf miss those couple of games in week 8 and week 9. And man, him and Geno just really gelled in a new kind of way. If you look at him weeks 1 to 7, Ian, 21% target share, 1.1 yards per route run, 13.4 fantasy points per game. Weeks 8 to 18, this dude had a 27% target share. And that's a pretty big sample. Week 8 to 18, 2.41 yards per route run, 17.7 fantasy points per game. So not quite as long as what we had from McConkey, which is why he's going later than McConkey. Also have a few questions here. Sam Darnold, going to start seeing ghosts again? I don't know. I mean, there's questions. We got a couple of tackles that can be pretty good, for the Seahawks if they can stay healthy, but they've got some interior offensive line issues. They did make some upgrades there. So I think there's a little bit of a concern there. We also have Cooper Kupp coming to the team, but man, I don't know about you. I'm just not going to worry about Cooper Kupp that much. And the reason why is DK Metcalf leaves. Like, at this point at DK Metcalf's in his career, even though he was never the alpha target earner we've seen from Kupp, I still think it's roughly the equivalent, right? You take away DK Metcalf, and if Kupp has a good season, it's probably somewhere the same. And JSN was still able to keep it going last year, even once we saw DK Metcalf return. So there's a smidge of a potential issue there. If they ask JSN to play a role he's really not good at, I just don't see them doing that with this young player. They spent a first-round pick on 3 years. Honestly, Ian, I really do feel like if the Sam Darnold thing can work out, right, and they can keep him clean, like there is a scenario where we look up and Kupp is injured again or really isn't what he once was. Like, who else are they going to throw the ball to? I know we got some Elijah Arroyo hype going. Guys, hand up. I even put a tweet out about Elijah Arroyo. There's some things to like. But, man, like we could be talking about 150-plus targets very easily for JSN this year.
Nothing like fantasy analysts hyping up tight ends who will not even come close to being drafted in home leagues around the country. So a tradition unlike any other there. But with JSN, man, look, I have him wide receiver 18, again, where he finished last year. You're a bit higher at wide receiver 13. So, Dwain, you are a father who loves showing off your son's fantasy draft after he absolutely crushes it every August, and that is awesome. I know you are so proud. Are you actually going to be clicking on JSN in round 3, though, when we have guys like Josh Allen, we have Lamar Jackson there, we have George Kittle not that far away? In your heart of hearts, one team as a father, Dwain, are you drafting Jackson Smith-Njigba?
I've been clicking him a lot. I have like 20% JSN, so I'm well above the market. I don't care.
One team.
One team. Yes, I'm taking him.
Okay.
I'm taking Jalen Hurts in the next round. Am I trying? I mean, I could take Josh Allen and then get George Kittle in the next round. So, I mean, like that's an option as well. I'll tell you this. If it's a 3 wide receiver league, I'm taking JSN. If it's a 2 wide receiver league, fine. Then you could go Josh Allen and turn around and go with George Kittle. You got to make sure that you're going to get Kittle, though, because if not, I'd rather take JSN and turn around and get Jalen Hurts.
George Kittle might as well be a skeleton, a key. I have also been drafting him all offseason long. So you got me back, Dwain, at least with the George Kittle note here on JSN. Someone that I've actually softened my stance on here and moved up in the ranks after being egregiously low. I think I started off the offseason with Marvin Harrison Jr. as like my wide receiver 26. I now have him up there at wide receiver 16, mainly because, Dwain, I spend a lot of time with you, and I do think you bring up a lot of really good points and happen to be a smart person. You are our director of analytics here at Fantasy Life, after all. And the thing I can't get past is how the supermodel tells us how freaking good Marv is, how good of a prospect he's been. And honestly, again, it's just a situation where, yes, Trey McBride is great, but you know what? I still think there's enough room in this offense for someone like Marv to take a step forward in year 2 and also be great himself. So now I'm in a great position, Dwain, where if you're right, then I'm going to be right because I'm now going to be drafting Marv. And if you're wrong, I get to yell at you. So let's talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. and his potential to break out in year 2 after, let's face it, a relatively disappointing year 1.
Yeah, and here's the good news. Consensus, he's wide receiver 18. You guys can go over to fantasylife.com. You can check out our ADP tool. I always sort by consensus. You're going to get ESPN, Yahoo, Real-Time Sports, Sleeper, as well as Underdog. So you get a nice view across all these. Obviously, if you're drafting on any one of those sites, just sort by the site you're going to be drafting on to get the latest information. We've got that data rerunning every single night to keep it nice and fresh for you guys. So wide receiver 18, I think that's fine. Like, I think that's a fine price. Like Underdog, I think he is a tad overpriced, Ian, just because of where he goes. There's a few guys going around him. But here's what I'll say. He's got the wide receiver 3 finish on his resume, guys, and by the hair of his chinny chin chin, 11.7 fantasy points per game. The cutoff is 11.5, so it was a low-end wide receiver 3. Not going to sit here and act like Marv was just out there balling the hell out. But the underlying data points, I think, are still encouraging. You tell me where you land here, but looking since 2011, wide receiver 2 worthy target share at 23%. You guys will see this. Swing, thank you for making these things and getting the visuals up for us. Our production team's always taking good care of us so you guys can see this. And if you're not following me and the numbers I'm spouting out, but air yards, 43%. That's wide receiver 1 worthy. So a guy that can work down the field and still earn a 23% target share is actually kind of rare. I know that the results weren't exactly there, but it was still good. 1.63 yards per route run. Not very good, Ian. That's wide receiver 4 worthy. This one, I think you're going to actually have a conniption fit. I think I just used a word from my mom. I'm going to have a conniption fit, Ian. The PFF receiving grade was 77.2. I really don't know how, because you keep bringing up the fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. broke 1 tackle. And PFF receiving grade, if you guys don't know how it works, is all about what the receiver adds after the ball is in their hands. If they get a first down, that does help them as well. So I was a little skeptical. I love PFF. We both used to work there, but when I looked at that, I was like 77.2, man. Ian's told me 27 times this offseason this guy broke 1 tackle. But here's the other thing. Man, this guy against man coverage, and this is something we really like to see for rookies, a 28% targets per route run. So basically, when he got a man coverage look, Kyler was saying, okay, Marv, I'm coming to you, my guy. So, and here's one last thing I want to say on Marv. Remember this, guys. While he didn't get the wide receiver 2 finish, there's really not a big difference between guys that finished as a wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 3 in their rookie season. So listen to this. Wide receivers that finished as that wide receiver 2, 33% of them went on to be wide receiver 1s in the following season. Wide receiver 3s, 26%. Like, again, this could just be a sample size thing. These are really close. Then if you look at the wide receiver 2 finishes in the following year for these guys, 25% of them that were wide receiver 2s, 43% of them that were wide receiver 3s. So it's really close. You shouldn't get too hung up on whether they finished as a wide receiver 2 as a rookie or as a wide receiver 3. They're really the same thing when it comes to this analysis, especially when the underlying data points like Marv points to multiple data points that look good. Again, I will say it comes down to the site that you're drafting on. I think he's slightly overpriced right now on Underdog, but wide receiver 19 right now, man, on ESPN, Yahoo, and Real Time Sports. And he's in round 4 of those drafts, Ian. So you could still take the elite quarterback, and then you come back for Marv. Right now on freaking Underdog, I will say it's a tough click to take Marv when you could take Josh Allen, you could take Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, any of those names you want to talk about.
Round 4, Marv, I can get behind. Round 3, again, that's where maybe some of my not so happy rankings were coming from earlier this offseason. So final point about the Yak. I love the account Jay Kuda. He mostly does baseball stuff, but, he'll always just have like these charts like, oh, have you done this? Yes, of course I've done that. And then he'll show the outliers. So the one I would, have for Jay Kuda out there, if by some, grace of God he's listening, every single wide receiver with 50 plus catches. Did you break more tackles than Zach Ertz last year? All of them are going to be yes, of course. The 2 that were not, Dwayne Sutton and Marvin Harrison Jr. So again, the Zach Ertz line, if you will. I know Marv wasn't getting fed screens or even like these shallow sort of targets that actually set you up to break tackles in the first place. So I will give him some defense there. But hopefully all that extra muscle he's been putting on this offseason pays off just a little bit here in 2025. It is legal for rookie wide receivers to get a lot better in year 2 and year 3, Dwayne. We must remember that as well. And I must try to remember that as well when we talk about Xavier Worthy, because this is someone, Dwayne, who does not have the sort of underlying good PFF receiving grade, ESPN receiver rating. I'll be honest, when I went ahead and watched every single one of his catches last week, I was not blown away. I was even a little bit disappointed by what I saw. This dude had 1 catch thrown over 30 yards downfield until the second half of the Super Bowl all season long. I understand the last one was cool. He caught a deep ball today at training camp, Dwayne. So maybe everything's finally coming around for Xavier Worthy. All that to say, Rashee Rice seemingly on the verge of being suspended. I've heard potentially 8 games. I've heard 4 games. But with him out of the picture, should at least set up Worthy a bit more than what we were thinking before. Regardless, what are your thoughts on Worthy as a year 2 breakout candidate?
And again, so thinking about the way I'm approaching it, you're going into year 2, and this is a guy that once he took over the starting role last year, he was actually really good, right? Now, he had a wide receiver 4 finish overall on the season. So that would kind of make him an outlier. Like if you go back and look historically, the guys that did that, Ian, you're going to like some of these, Josh Gordon and Allen Robinson. Ooh. They finished as wide receiver 4s in their rookie season, and they went to buck the trend and go nuclear for wide receiver 1 years the next year. And Josh Gordon with a bunch of quarterbacks most people will never know. Allen Robinson, it was on an insane Blake Bortles like spike season that never happened again. So kind of funny how those two guys worked out. We have a guy named Patrick Mahomes here who I feel a little bit better about. So just real quick, and I put this out on Twitter, and it's funny. Like, I get it, guys. Everybody said the same thing as you. You got to remove the Super Bowl, man. These are like third string guys. And I get where you're coming from. But here's the thing. We would have to go back and do that for every receiver across all the games for the season. Remember, guys, some receivers, remember DJ Moore 2 years ago against the Commanders when he was playing against like 5th and 6th string guys like the whole game, I think for like 2 different games. We didn't take all that away from DJ Moore. Maybe we should have because he came back down to earth the next year, but we would have to do that for all the players. And so I think that's, while you have a good argument, I totally get it. I've already prepared for this, Ian, because I knew you were going to do this. And I also felt the wrath of the people. So I thought I would get ready. So here's the thing. Once Xavier Worthy took over that starting role in week 14, not only did the fantasy points come around, he averaged 16.2 fantasy points per game, excluding the Super Bowl. Take that, guys.
Wow.
He included 19 points per game if we include the Super Bowl. Now, I did exclude the game week 18 because he played 4% of the snaps. They just rested all their starters, okay? Now, in no Super Bowl action, his yards per route run, 1.71, okay? So that's wide receiver 3 territory, a 77.4 PFF receiver grade, wide receiver 3 territory. If we give him the Super Bowl, which I've heard Ian, guys, you hold him accountable here so many times, complain about people wanting to take the best plays away from players. This is what he did from week 14 on. 2.51 yards per route run, 84.7 PFF receiver grade for Mr. Xavier Worthy. So again, it's just looking at probabilities, guys. He was a round 1 pick. He's the fastest guy ever at the NFL Combine. Should it really surprise us, like if he could suddenly be good and kindle this connection with Patrick Mahomes? It was actually good down the field, not only against backups, but against like real life players. So I want to be in on Xavier Worthy. Here's the one thing I'll say about Worthy, though. I kind of get concerned about how much he might move up in ADP on the Rashee Rice news. I was actually drafting him a lot, assuming Rashee Rice was going to play this year, because I'm just thinking, look, the guy showed the signs. It's Patrick Mahomes. It's Andy Reid. We know if they had their druthers, they would love to throw the ball more. And if these two guys can both ball out and live up to expectations, they're just, Patrick Mahomes can have a year. Now what I worry about, man, I don't know if I want Xavier Worthy if you're going to make me take him in round 3. Because once Rashee Rice is back, then I do have the question mark of, man, can he keep it up? Because we have not seen that yet from Xavier Worthy. He's only done this without Rashee Rice in the lineup.
And again, right now, ESPN's still going round 5. That's fantastic. I'll draft him round 5, 8 days of the week. But if we do see him get up in round 3, even round 4, Dwain, like, okay, if we are, again, going from just the idea that we're in one fantasy league, all right, just only one time, I'm taking George Kittle over Xavier Worthy. I'm taking Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson over Xavier Worthy. I'm taking James Cook or Marion Hampton over Xavier Worthy. So again, I think it's fair to rank this dude inside the top 20 or so wide receivers at this point, especially given the Rice news. But it's those other positions that are going to be available in round 4 that will probably have me hold him back again in my home league drafts. Are you on the same page?
Yeah, and I think he's going to go later in the home league drafts. I think that's the good news. He's probably about to steam to the moon on Underdog. Like, no telling where this guy's going to end up. So I don't know how much more I'll get of him. But to your point, if you've got a quarterback like the ones you talked about on the board, I want them. I want Omarion Hampton over him. I think James Cook, like that one's close just because we know the touchdown regression with James Cook. Now, you could also argue, dude, they could just give James Cook 60% of the carries this year, just like we've seen like Devon Achane grow his role. We've seen other guys do it, and then you just like regret your life for not taking a guy on the Buffalo Bills getting a lot of touches. But I think that's the borderline spot. I agree with you on Kittle. I'm taking him, taking one of the elite quarterbacks. I am taking Omarion Hampton over Xavier Worthy. I think the only other caveat, we'll move on. I know I'm already taking too long. Again, is it a 3 wide receiver league or if it's 2? If it's 2, all those things we just said, very easy. If you have to start 3 wide receiver, just remember, guys, now we got a supply and demand issue that starts to set in. And so I might lean more to Worthy over some of the other guys, depending on what I did with my early picks.
Again, that's why it is always important to be on top of all your league rules and settings. That's why us at Fantasy Life, again, have customizable rankings and all that jazz for you. Because again, your fantasy leagues are unique. So should you be your fantasy advice. So with that in mind, guys, let's get into it. It's time for the ADP audit presented by Premier National Sports, talking to middle class potential breakout wide receivers. Zay Flowers, Dwayne, someone who we both agree, very, very good in real life. We talk about that U.S. Olympic team that's going to actually have a flag football out there. I think Zay Flowers deserves to be on that immediately, even over, Kyle Hamilton, maybe even the Lamar Jacksons of the world. That's how freaking difficult this dude is to slow down. That said, last year, Lamar threw for 4,100 yards, 41 touchdowns. Zay Flowers is wide receiver 32. We've never seen a wide receiver crack a top 20 finish with Lamar Jackson under center for the Ravens. I am not trying to slander him. It's a run-first offense. We got tight ends involved. We even got other wide receivers involved. Thoughts on Zay Flowers, Dwayne, if he has what it takes to break out ahead of his year 3 season?
Yeah, and I think that's a legit concern. Like Lamar, as much as we love him, like he's due for some regression in the pass game. I'm writing up my QB tiers. I just stopped that to jump over here and, have the show today on this. And that was one of the things I talked about with Lamar. Like, still love Lamar. You're drafting him, but there could be some regression in the passing game. So I think it's a great point by you. Again, Zay Flowers just checks the marks, right? This guy has got a wide receiver 3 finish on his resume, and he's a guy that all the underlying data points in, they got better. 25% target share up to 27%. That's wide receiver 1 worthy going back to 2011. Air yards, 23% to 30%. So working a little bit more downfield, getting more targets. That's wide receiver 2 worthy. Yards per route run, 2.2 freaking 5. That's a wide receiver 1, and PFF receiving grade 83.8. That's a wide receiver 1. So when you look at the underlying data points, like he does fit the mold of a guy that, in year 3 could be a wide receiver 1. Maybe he's more of a wide receiver 2. And I think it can happen even with a little bit less of the passing yards from Lamar. I also think you and I talk about, man, there are some very near misses with Zay Flowers, where this dude has a cornerback in the blender, and Lamar, and this is where variance comes in, misses him. A few of those plays last year, we had a wide receiver 2 finish on the table last season, but we didn't get it because of a few of those. So just a few of those things go his way if he holds the line here. The other thing is, like, it's a pretty good receiving core around him, but there's no one, because they split the time with the tight ends, right? There's not like there's someone sitting there to be like, oh man, they have this other elite target earner. It really is Zay Flowers. He has been the main focal point of the offense. We like Mark Andrews, we like Isaiah Likely. Ian likes Rashad Bateman, but they're not going to be the guys that I think can hold Zay Flowers back. So I will say this, to your point, if I just give the percentages, so if you look across the entire sample pool that had these marks of what we're at with Zay Flowers, 14% of them went on to become wide receiver 1s. So we're not saying like Zay Flowers this is why he's further down the list. 14% of them went on to become wide receiver 2s. So 28% of the time you got an improvement from the wide receiver 3 standing that you had. So it's not like this thing is a lock, but again, like I think he just checks a lot of great boxes. Closest comps, like whenever you look at it and you go back and you look at these guys, it's Chris Godwin and Deebo Samuel. Those are 2 really good ones. And then Antonio Brown and Garrett Wilson. So the first 2 I gave you ended up being wide receiver 1s. The other 2 turned into wide receiver 2s.
Looking at our next potential breakout, Dwayne, Mr. Rome Odunze from the Bears. Last year finished as the PPR wide receiver 49. Ray McLeod was wide receiver 50. Rome Odunze averaged 0.1 more PPR points per game than Jalen Coker last season. Yes, we can talk ourselves into the Amon-Ra St. Brown role in Ben Johnson's offense, but I would also like to point out that going back to 2021, Dwayne, the Lions wide receivers, obviously the number 1 target earner has been our one-shoe sun god. After that, Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds, Jameson Williams, who was barely on the field until this last season. So again, hardly a 1-for-1 whenever we're talking about any of these roles going from one scheme, one offense to another, particularly so when we also have so much more target competition on hand for Rome Odunze. That said, despite last season's disappointment, still going to be costing you guys a wide receiver 3 price tag, which again, not the end of the world, Dwayne, but it is wild to me that we are seeing, again, Rome still so expensive after what we have to call a disappointing rookie season.
Yeah, and look, I get it. Like, this is a hot topic. I put this tweet out earlier on Twitter about the hit rates for profiles like Rome Odunze, and I don't know if they're all Bear fans. They may have all been swing burner accounts, but I had like 30 people come at me saying, you just have to throw it out because the offense was so bad. Here's my challenge with that, Ian. Let's see where you stand. Rome Odunze was also part of the offense. So Rome Odunze also has to be held accountable to some extent for what happened to the Bears last year. Do we like Shane Waldron? Hell no. We don't like Shane Waldron on this show. Do we like Ben Johnson? Yes, we do like Ben Johnson. So look, the offensive line, massive upgrade, the biggest upgrade I can ever recall seeing from PFF or Brandon Thorne. So lots of positive things going on here for the Bears, and I actually can see where the folks are coming from. I think there is some context that's needed. The whole team was terrible, right? So we can't completely dismiss it. But I think you got to take a balanced approach here. And if you go back and you look at the comparisons to Rome Odunze, and by the way, Ian, some of these guys were high first-round draft picks that, guess what, played on bad offenses. And we did not give them a pass. Guess how many of these guys went on to be a wide receiver 1 the next year that profiled like Rome Odunze? It's an easy guess.
1.
You got this.
0.
0%. Okay. Now I will give you guys the silver lining for swings, a swing silver lining like that. That just really goes together. 33% of them did go on to become wide receiver 2s. And in that group, one guy we just talked about, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who had a lot of target competition. You had to deal with Keenan Allen. I know everybody's fat and old, but go look at his target share, guys. He was getting the ball thrown to him, right? And DJ Moore had like a 25% target share. So kind of hard to earn targets to guys getting that many. Another one, DeAndre Hopkins jumped to wide receiver 2 status. So one of these things with these slow start rookies that finish as wide receiver 5, 6, 7, another kind of like teaching you guys how to fish versus just talking about the players. These slow starters do sometimes more often turn into a wide receiver 2 in their next year. And if you're talking about DeAndre Hopkins, he then went on to become an epic wide receiver 1. So it's a never say never kind of scenario. We're not saying it can't ever happen for Rome Odunze. I do think he's priced about right, Ian, because 50% of his comps notched a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 season. We don't call wide receiver 3s a breakout, but it would be a pretty big improvement for Rome. And you get him at wide receiver. His consensus draft position right now is wide receiver 37. So you're getting him in round 7 of drafts. Like if he's a miss, I don't think it ultimately kills your fantasy season. And if it hits, maybe you do get the wide receiver 2. You just need to be sober-minded about it, guys. There's a chance you get a complete dud because I just told you 50% of these guys are a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. So what does that make the other 50%? Unusable for your fantasy teams. That's a boom bust wide receiver 3.
I will say, seeing that he is going pick overall 93 on Yahoo right now, 86 on ESPN, I can get behind that price a little bit more. Again, it's that round 6, early round 7 spots that I've been a bit more skeptical about throughout the offseason. But let's talk about another receiver who I actually have been drafting a bit more because he's actually going even cheaper than Rome Odunze right now. And it is Packers, maybe wide receiver 1, Jayden Reed. Look, we do have the concern where, he only had a 75, I think it was 74 actually % route rate. It would be a lot cooler if that was at 90% or higher. That said, Dwayne, I do think Jayden Reed has this combination of being really freaking good at football, led all wide receivers in yards per target last year, also completely lethal in the run game, getting his design targets. It's an offense we like with Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love. I mean, even if we aren't getting quite as many routes as we prefer, can't we lean on the fact that Jayden Reed is a stone cold baller out here?
Yeah, I actually think that, in Jayden Reed, he was one of the guys when I got excited because I was like, he actually is going at a spot in the draft where I think there is value by taking Jayden Reed. You talked about his ability to offset some of the concerns around route participation by getting the ball in the run game. Ultimately, we know that targets guys are worth a lot more than carries, right? It's a situation where we want him on the field more. But here's the other thing, Ian. How many times have we thought that we really have our thumb on the pulse of what a coach is going to do with a player just because they did it that way the year or two before, right? We've seen it tons over the last 3 to 4 years. And suddenly you look up and you're like, whoa, they just gave this guy an 85% route participation. Christian Watson is hurt. Romeo Doubs, is just never really shown to be a great target earner. You look at Dontavian Wicks, we got the hand problems. Not sure the coaches trust him. They draft Matthew Golden. I think that's a clear signal that they might consider a shakeup in their wide receiver core. And why not let it be Jayden Reed and Matthew Golden? Like, look, you look at LaFleur, I like one of your sayings, he's going to forget more about football than I'll ever know. But I'll tell you right now, if I were a defensive coordinator playing against the Packers, I would rather you not have Jayden Reed and Matthew Golden on the field in the 2 wide receiver sets. I would actually welcome you to have Romeo Doubs out there instead. So when I looked at this, like some of the underlying data points weren't necessarily like in that high end range, but he does have a previous wide receiver 2 finish already on his resume. I mean, he's going wide receiver 46. He's going around 10 consensus in draft. So Jaden Reed, after I wrote this article, has actually been one of the players I've corrected myself on the most. As far as I had been taking only Matthew Golden, which I've continued to do, but now I've basically got to that spot on the Packers. I'm like, okay, you take Matthew Golden, I'm clicking on Jaden Reed. And so I really do like the opportunity for Jaden Reed, especially with the price tag here.
Pick 124 on ESPN. Round 11, Jaden Reed. This economy, Dwayne, if round 11 Jaden Reed is wrong, I do not want to be right. I would rather be right, I guess, than completely draft a dud. But you guys know what I'm saying.
27% of his comps, 27% of his comps went on to give you a wide receiver 1 finish. 1 and 3. Like, he's in a really freaking strong comp group, man. He should be a high priority where he's going in drafts. 37% of the time they were wide receiver 2s, okay? So for you guys, sitting there at home, and you're adding that up, that's well over half the time. That's like 64% of the time you're at least getting a wide receiver 2 out of his previous comps. I mean, I think that makes Jaden Reed an almost must draft where he's going right now.
To summarize, guys, Zay Flowers, great in real life. Maybe he does have the potential to, again, put on some more upside than we've seen in Fantasyland this year. Rome Odunze, maybe a little more skeptical, but yeah, draft freaking Jaden Reed. This has been your ADP audit presented by Premier National Sports. Guys, we've been talking about Premier National Sports here on the Fantasy Life Show, and for good reason. They are your go-to one-stop shop resource for all things NIL. So if you yourself are a high school athlete, you have one in the family, you have a friend down the street, maybe even a stranger who's just balling out at the local high school, we invite you to, again, remind them that Premier National Sports can help you through all things NIL. It is such a new process. It's the wild, wild west out there right now. And again, Premier National Sports provides you a trusted recruiting and NIL resource for high school athletes and their families. So help rising high school athletes take their game to the next level with personalized recruiting strategies and NIL education. Check them out. If you haven't yet, you can get in touch with their team at premiernationalsports.com. All right, Dwayne, time for the other guys. We got a group of players who are not going to be costing you as much of a pretty penny as some of the Rome Odunzes and Zay Flowers of the world. Doesn't mean they still can't return some great costs based on what we've seen so far. So kicking things off with one of, I think, just the favorite kind of film nerd sort of guys out there, Colts wide receiver 1, Josh Downs. Similar conversation as Jaden Reed, there's other guys there. But man, Dwayne, some of these underlying Josh Downs numbers, borderline erotic if I do say so myself.
Yeah, look, the underlying talent profile says wide receiver 1. Target share, 26%. Targets per route run, 28%. Yards per route run, 2.20. The only thing are air yards. They were wide receiver 7 worthy. But we have seen guys like Rashee Rice, Chris Godwin. They've overcome that to really become absolute dogs and go on to score a lot of fantasy points. PFF receiving grade, also wide receiver 1 worthy. Obviously, already has a wide receiver 3 finish on his profile. So he's checking really all of the boxes. But Ian, it's a challenge for me to get there. We got, it's the trifecta, man. We've got a lack of playing time unless they change it, which they could, 75% route participation. Okay. But they still have Michael Pittman. They still added Adonai Mitchell last year. They still have Alec Pierce. Are they just suddenly going to give him this role? I don't know. I personally would, but I'm not the coaching staff of the Indianapolis Colts. We also added Tyler Warren, man, who's going to get a lot of those targets underneath. Tyler Warren's an absolute freaking yak monster. This dude is like, he's got his number after John Riggins because he's a freaking beast with the ball in his hand. We have questionable quarterback play, whether it's, we're praying it's Daniel Jones. Like, that's not ideal, guys, when you're praying that it's Daniel Jones. And man, again, it's a crowded receiving room. So playing time, he's going to have to overcome that. Quarterback challenges has to overcome that. And the crowded receiving room. Talent has it. So he's on the list, but it's just hard to move him too far up the ranks because of all the other things.
Less crowded receiving room in San Francisco. We have Ricky Pearsall coming off a rookie year where he flashed, but obviously, I don't know if you guys remember hearing about this. He did get shot. So we got to give him a little bit of slack there based on what we saw. Thoughts on Ricky Bullets going to year 2, Dwayne?
Yeah, man, it's an incomplete profile because we just don't have enough data on Ricky Pearsall. We just know that he was shot and that he was a first-round draft pick. Now, what I will say is in the last 2 games where he finally got starter-worthy numbers, again, caveat, guys, super freaking small sample, okay? He did ball out. We're talking about a guy that came out here and actually averaged 23.8 fantasy points per game, gave you a 22% target share, an 88 utilization score. So some really nice things for Pearsall. But man, it's tough to hang your hat on that. So I think he's a projection. He's a projection. You're having to project that he was a first-round pick. You're having to project that, okay, Deebo Samuel's gone, Ayuk coming off the injury. He is starting the offseason on the pup, but it does sound like he should be back sooner rather than later. So I've definitely been mixing in some Pearsall, but just not someone where it's like, oh, I'm going to take Pearsall over time. And he goes right now ahead of Jaden Reed. He goes ahead of Matthew Golden. He goes ahead a lot of these other names that we've been talking about. I do like to mix him in because I don't want to be blind to the fact that he could, have a good season and an offense that we like that knows how to scheme these players up. So I like Ricky Pearsall. He's just a tad steamed in my opinion right now, especially over on Underdog. If you look at him consensus, it's round 9. But a big part of that is Underdog pushing it up. You're going to get him in around 10 or 11 right now, guys, if you're drafting ESPN, Yahoo, a lot of these other sites.
Speaking of small but enticing sample sizes, Cedric Tillman, Dwayne, someone where when you look between week 7 and 11, which I know sounds ridiculous, but really it was post Amari Cooper trade and pre Cedric Tillman having a season-ending concussion. Wide receiver 8 in PPR points per game. The guy was flashing, Dwayne. He was putting up better numbers than Jerry Jeudy. We still don't love the quarterback situation in Cleveland for the 50th straight year in a row. But hey, Cedric Tillman, you're talking about a true potential diamond in the rough here. This is one of the rare wide receivers where when I am these later rounds of the drafts, I wouldn't mind throwing a dart at.
Yeah, man, former 3rd-round pick for that 4 games, and it's not an arbitrary sample. Like you said, Amari Cooper left. What did that do? That gave a full-time role to Cedric Tillman. I wish he could have stayed healthy so we could have seen it for longer. He ended up getting hurt, but the dude averaged 18.1 fantasy points over that stretch. Okay, guys, that's a wide receiver 1. Again, a small sample, but this is a guy that did, like you said, outplayed Jerry Jeudy, man. He had a 22. It was close. He had a 22% target share versus 20% for Jeudy over that same stretch. But the thing we like about him, man, a guy that can get down the field. He can win the contested catch stuff. He's a guy that can do things in the red zone. Once you get in the green zone, he can be a guy that you really do look for. I think the one caveat with Cedric Tillman is, what do they do with Deontay Johnson? Deontay Johnson, if he locks down a starting role or he's playing in the slot, as much as everyone may hate him, what's Deontay Johnson going to do? He's going to earn targets. Then suddenly it's like, okay, we got Jerry Jeudy, we got David Njoku, and we have Deontay Johnson, and we have Cedric Tillman, and we have Joe Flacco or Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel starting at quarterback. Not ideal. So it's a longer shot, but I do really like taking swings on him in best ball. Ian, I think he's going to start outside. I think he's going to give you an 80 to 85% route participation, which means he's going to run into some of these spike games, which for where he goes in those drafts, I think is good. And he also does have a slight chance to just actually be the best wide receiver on the team.
Similar to your point about praying for Daniel Jones for Josh Downs, I don't love the fact that in the year 2025, with all due respect to Mr. Elite, we just need Joe Flacco to be under center for one of our takes to work out. So certainly needs a few things to roll his way for Mr. Tillman. Last one, though, Dwayne, rising second-year wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills, Keon Coleman, who is going as the wide receiver 53 in ADP right now. May I please remind you guys that we had Gabe Davis, even with Stefon Diggs in town, going as the wide receiver 24 and the wide receiver 43 in the years 2022 and 2023. I don't know about you, Dwayne. I'm willing to buy someone like Keon Coleman, who, again, flashed as a rookie in the freaking Buffalo Bills offense.
I will say, to our credit, you and I were telling people to not take Gabe Davis at those prices in those years because of some of the things we're talking about here. But Coleman does have a much cheaper price. Gabe Davis was rocketing up the draft boards. People are just ignoring Keon Coleman right now. Ian, you can get him in round 10. It's actually lower than that if you remove the Underdog ADP, but he's the wide receiver 51. Look, not much to hang your hat on here, guys. We're talking about a guy that was a wide receiver 6 as far as like the way he finished with 9.1 fantasy points per game. And I cut it off at his wrist injury. I was just like, okay, fine. The dude hurt his wrist. We're just going to count the games before he got hurt to try to be fair to him. But if you look at his targets per route run, what he did against man coverage was actually decent. 26% targets per route run against man. That's wide receiver 2 numbers. The rest of the numbers though were wide receiver 5 to 6 worthy. Now the one other one, and this goes back to your Gabe Davis point, was his 27% air yard share. That was wide receiver 3 worthy. So I do think the path for Keon Coleman is like he's the best shot at giving them a down the field present, and he ends up being a guy that they don't take off the field, right? And he gets a 90% route participation. If he does that, especially in best ball where you don't have to pick your weeks, I think there's a chance for him. And I did call, this is the Lloyd Christmas special of of the year 1 and 2 breakouts. So you're telling me a chance, Ian. All right, I'm going to give you the historical hit rates. 1 out of 15 went on to be a wide receiver 1, but it's a good one. Alshon Jeffrey went from 7.9 fantasy points per game and an 18% targets per route run and a crappy yards per route run at 1.41 to become a wide receiver 1 the next year, despite having to do that alongside a beast in Brandon Marshall. So hat tip to you, Mr. Alshon freaking Jeffrey. What a beast you are. Michael Pittman's the other one. He went from he was 1 out of 15 to go to a wide receiver 2 finish. So 7%. So 14% of the time, comps compared to Keon Coleman gave you a wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 1 finish. Guys, I get it. Not necessarily like ideal numbers, but he does get to play with Josh Allen. So, I mean, I think you can take that. That's a positive. And again, the price is really good. And in a redraft league, Ian, the other thing is, like, man, he doesn't do good in the first 3 weeks. You just cut him. So again, I think the price is what's fine on him. Odds are long, but the price is fine.
Price is right on Keon Coleman. All I needed to hear, Dwain. I appreciate you, my man. Appreciate you guys for tuning in to another edition of the Fantasy Live Show. Monday through Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern. Always check out Friday at noon with some very special guests as well. So for Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in to the Fantasy Live Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.